If there's one thing the horror genre loves just as much as sequels, it's those bloody prequels. If you have a hot property, you can bet your snout that it'll be picked apart until every element of mystique has vanished, for better or worse. And as a result, it seems inevitable that the following villains will get their own shot at an origin movie at some point. Now, I want to clarify that I'm not saying that these would be good ideas. I mean, we've seen how terribly these types of films can go. Cough, Halloween, Rob Zombie, cough. But that these are the candidates that you can bet Hollywood are looking at. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror origin movies that feel inevitable. Number 10. Mick Taylor, Wolf Creek. Few characters in modern horror history are quite as disgusting, persistent, and outright terrifying as John Jarrett's Mick Taylor of the Wolf Creek franchise. For Mick, he spends his day stalking the Australian outback looking for victims, with Taylor having a particular penchant for offing tourists. A racist, homophobic, generally xenophobic serial killer with expert hunting skills and an enjoyment for slow torture, Jarrett's character is someone who forever remains a chilling proposition on screens both big and small. One reason why a Mick Taylor origin picture seems likely to happen though is the simple fact that Wolf Creek creator Greg McLean has already overseen 2 prequel novels, Wolf Creek Origin and Wolf Creek Desolation Game, that focus on a young Mick and the childhood that chiseled him into the creepy prick that we see in the 2 Wolf Creek movies and the 2-season TV series. So with McLean having already mapped out both Origin with Aaron Stearns and Desolation Game with Brett McBean, it would make perfect sense for him to return to write and direct a prequel picture that pulls plentiful inspiration from those 2 novels. Number 9. Bughuul, Sinister. Due to the relatively low cost of making the movies, I mean the first Sinister only cost $3 million to put together, the Sinister franchise is one that's surely too hard to leave alone. While Sinister 2 is now 6 years old, I know that doesn't compute in my mind, it feels like there has to be another outing for the franchise at some point down the line. And such an outing seems like it needs to dive a little deeper on the series' eerie villain, Bughuul. Otherwise known by the far more fun moniker of Mr. Boogie, Bughuul is a pagan deity who exists purely to devour the souls of humans after corrupting them to kill their families. Now, we know that Bughuul had his mouth sewed shut by his brother Moloch, but that's about it where it pertains to the rogue's origins. In that brotherly relationship, there's plenty of fuel for an origin movie. Plus, there's also the chance to properly visit Bughuul's netherworld residence. Do we particularly need an origin flick for this character? In fairness, likely not, but that's never stopped such an origin story from being told in the past. Number 8. The elite hunting group Hostel. It seems impossible to believe that the Hostel franchise won't be revisited at some point in the future. As of this writing, it's been 10 years since the straight-to-video Hostel Part 3. Horror being horror though, there will undoubtedly be a fresh lick of paint put on this franchise at some point down the line. And when that does happen, the obvious way to go would be to step back in time and look at the origins of the elite hunting group. The organization is behind the grim, gruesome torture seen across the Hostel series, and exploring the formation of the elite hunting group is definitely one way to bring something fresh to the table. All we know now about the EHG so far is that the group is headed up by Sasha Rasimov. But much like Sasha himself, the elite hunting group's roots are very much shrouded in mystery during the 3 films to feature the company. Diving into this history though could prove for an engaging watch if and when we eventually get a Hostel prequel film. Number 7. The Strangers. It may not have quite struck the same beats amongst fans and critics as its predecessor, but The Strangers Prey at Night feels like a movie designed to force the 2-movie franchise back on itself. By this, it means that the way things played out in the 2018 sequel would indicate that the only real way to take the next film is to make it a prequel offering that would explore the early days of the Man in the Mask, the Pin-Up Girl, and of course, Dollface. A third Strangers movie has been discussed, and thus one would imagine that any such threequel would likely revert to a time when the property's 3 main villains were actually still alive. Additionally, it's also worth noting that while The Strangers Prey at Night didn't do huge numbers at the box office, the film was relatively cheap to make. Obviously, one part of what makes The Strangers and its sequel work is the mystery and randomness of Man in the Mask, Pin-Up Girl, and Dollface. The idea that they're just doing this murder randomly is why they're so scary. So, do I think a film should fill in the blanks of these characters? Hell no, but there's no reason witnessing an earlier crime spree couldn't be entertaining. Maybe even the crime spree that made them who they are today. Number 6. The Blue Skeleton, The House's October Build. After an impressive first film, The Houses October Built 2 had the hugely disappointing reveal that the events of both movies were all staged in order to promote the blue skeleton haunt and make stars of our would-be protagonists of these two pictures. Despite this forehead-slapping decision, there have been rumblings that a third movie could be on the way. If so, it seems logical to think that this could be an origin tale for the very real, very disturbed Blue Skeleton group. As the first movie ends, the belief is that the 5 leads, who have been documenting haunted house attractions as the main narrative of the film, were buried alive and left to die after running afoul of the eerie Blue Skeleton sorts, who were murderers parading as workers at spooky attractions. Somehow, having survived that encounter, our heroes are back in the haunted house game in The Houses October Built 2, and again find themselves running up against the Blue Skeleton crew before that dismal final act revelation. One way to get fans back on side after 2017's sequel though would be to go back in time, detailing how the Blue Skeleton was at one point a very real thing and responsible for plentiful nefarious acts. Number 5. Claire the Stylist. Of all the characters on this list, the stylist's Claire is easily the one with the most mystery to her backstory. Hell, audiences don't even know Claire's last name, let alone any further details about what shaped this hairstylist's chilling habits. For those who are yet to see this amazing feature-length directorial debut, in this 2020 picture, itself adapted from a 2016 short of the same name, Claire is a multi-dimensional killer who takes the scalps of some of those clients who come through her shop door. While Claire carries out some true atrocities throughout the stylist, you can't help but feel a sense of sympathy for her in a way. We don't get to see what exactly, but it is obvious that Claire has been through something that crafted her into the figure that she is. A figure who is longing to escape her own life and walk in someone else's shoes, or I guess, someone else's scalp. It's been confirmed that there are ideas floating around for future stylist movies, and exploring Claire's origin story seems like a logical step to take at some point down the line. Number 4. Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th. Now, bear with me here, because I know that when it comes to Jason Voorhees, audiences are fully familiar with his early years. As explained in several of the 12 movies to feature Camp Crystal Lake's most infamous son, young Jason was heavily protected by his young Pamela. However, when Pamela had to take her boy to her job working as a cook at the local summer camp, Jason was bullied and tragically thrown into a lake where he was presumed to have drowned. While we've seen this tale detailed time and time again, the part of Jason Voorhees' story that we've not seen yet is how this troubled soul went from a presumed dead teenager to a hulking powerhouse with murderous intentions. Sure, horror hounds have been introduced to the shack that Jason lived in and converted to a shrine to his deceased old lady, but we've not been privy to how Jason survived his purported drowning, how he adapted to life without any family, and how he spent his teenage years waiting for the right moment to strike at Camp Crystal Lake. Again, I'm not saying I want to see any of this, but if all the other characters can get some kind of origin story, you know Jason's coming. I guess they just need to sort out that rights problem first. Number 3, The Blair Witch, The Blair Witch Project. The Blair Witch is a figure who we've only seen fleetingly across the 3 movies and 4 video games to date, and that's only if you believe what you see is actually the Blair Witch herself. Also, yeah, there's been more games than there have movies. I mean, who knew? Like certain other franchises featured elsewhere on this list, Blair Witch still has solid name value. Enough name value, in fact, to have people returning to the well and carving up a new Blair Witch picture at some point in the future. Given how different in-story witnesses have reported entirely different looks for the Blair Witch as well, it could be fun to explore these purported appearances and visitations in more detail, without even settling on one version of the character and completely ruining the mystique. Then, of course, there's the chance to really look at the story of Ellie Kedward and see her fully at work as the woods of Burkittsville rack up countless numbers of missing people and dead bodies. As mentioned, with the Blair Witch still having some semblance of name value, it seems highly likely that we'll be back in Burkittsville before we know it. Number 2, Pennywise, It. To the Losers Club, the shape-shifting creature at the center of Stephen King's It is known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. The thing is though, Pennywise has undertaken countless different names and numerous different forms over centuries spent causing chaos on Earth. Speaking to Entertainment Weekly shortly after the release of the second It picture, Bill Skarsgård, who plays Pennywise, showed that he's certainly up to exploring the character's past, saying, quote, "The book ends where the second movie ends, so that is the final chapter of this story. There is this interesting aspect of going back in time before all this happened. There might be a story there that might be worth exploring," end quote. Likewise, screenwriter Gary Dauberman had similar thoughts during an interview with Gizmodo, saying, quote, "I do think it was on this planet for a very, very, very long time, and that's a lot of bloodshed and a lot of stories to tell, and I think you could do that for sure," end quote. So, an It prequel with Bill Skarsgård back in the saddle, given the response to Skarsgård's Pennywise and most importantly the financial returns of the two It movies, it would seem like a no-brainer to delve deeper into the murky backstory of this sinister, otherworldly Harlequin. Number 1. The Crooked Man, The Conjuring 2. What makes the Crooked Man stand out from the rest of the sinister sorts featured on this list is that the Conjuring 2 character has already been loosely announced for his own origin feature. In May 2017, a month after The Conjuring 2 came out, producer Peter Safran revealed that the Crooked Man was being discussed for his own movie, with work formally beginning on that picture a month later. Unfortunately, here we are 4 years on, and said film, simply titled The Crooked Man at this stage anyway, has yet to stalk its way onto the silver screen. In fact, it's been radio silence on The Crooked Man for 2 years by this point, although it does seem inevitable that the film will eventually happen. While plans were in place to push forward with this effort, those plans did change once The Nun took home $365 million from a $22 million budget, meaning that a Nun sequel became an immediate priority, in addition to The Conjuring 3, The Devil Made Me Do It. As for the Crooked Man's role in The Conjuring 2, it is going to be interesting how they extrapolate an origin story from that appearance. So, that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are there any of these movies that you think would be a good idea? And are there any origin stories that I haven't mentioned that you do definitely want to see? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists and news like this on the regular. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.